Good evening, everyone. If I could have your attention, and we're fortunate tonight to welcome Tass Welch from Community of Christ Church, who will lead us in our invocation. And I also want to ask Tass to Tate Prezano, who is a student graduated from Cambridge High School and was at the University of Georgia, was critically injured today. I think he's in stable condition right now, but if you would please include him and his family in your prayers.
Father, I thank you that we have the freedom to come and gather, that we have the freedom to have the city government and to be able to elect officials, to come together and have them vote on things that are needed in the city of Milton. Thank you so much for each person that is on this council. And Father, I just ask right now that you be with Tate Prezano and his family. He has been injured today, and we just lift all of them up. He is in critical condition, but stable. And so I just ask all of us to keep his family and Tate in our prayers. We know that you can do amazing things, and we just ask now that you provide and that you help the medical team to do what needs to be done for this young man. And I ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Tass. Okay, I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Milton City Council for Monday, April 22nd, 2019 to order. Sudi, if you'll please call the roll and make general announcements.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll be happy to call a roll for the April 22nd, 2019 regular meeting. I would like to remind those in attendance to please silence all cell phones at this time. Those attending the meeting who would like to make a public comment, you're required to complete a public comment card prior to speaking on the item. All speakers, please identify yourself by name, address, and organization before beginning your comment. If you are representing an organization, an affidavit is required stating that you have the authority to speak on behalf of that organization. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited. Please refrain from any applause, cheering, booing, outbursts, or dialogue with any person speaking. Anyone in violation will be asked to leave. As I call roll this evening, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Joe Lockwood.
Here.
Councilmember Peyton Jamison.
Here.
Councilmember Matt Kuntz.
Here.
Councilmember Laura Bentley.
Here.
Councilmember Carol Cookerly.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Longoria.
Here.
Councilmember Rick Morick.
Here.
Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight, and welcome to the City of Milton. Next item is our agenda. Sudi, if you'd call that.
This item is approval of the meeting agenda. Agenda item number 19081.
Okay. I would like to add an executive session to discuss land acquisition. Is there any other changes to the agenda that council or staff would have? Okay. I'll open up for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the meeting agenda with the addition of an executive session to discuss land acquisition.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to approve the agenda with the addition of executive session to discuss land acquisition. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Okay. Next item is general public comment. Public comment is a time for citizens to share information with the mayor and city council and to provide input and opinions on any matter that is not scheduled for its own public hearing during today's meeting. Each citizen who chooses to participate in public comment must complete a comment card and submit it to the city clerk. Please remember this is not a time to engage the mayor or members of city council in conversation. When your name is called, please come forward and speak into the microphone and state your name and address for the record. You'll have 5 minutes for remarks. Sudi, do we have any general public comment?
Yes, we have one, sir, and that's from Gary Jablonski.
Okay.
You need to start the clock. Gary Jablonski, 2680 Grastview Drive, Milton. I represent myself only. First, I want to congratulate the city on receiving the new fire apparatus. I couldn't be there for the push-in, but I'm happy to see that the new fire apparatus represents city funds well spent. Second, I want to see a post office in Milton. And whatever you can do is, I'd appreciate it. And finally, I want to talk about road conditions. Hopewell Road from Thompson Road around Bell Park north to Hamby Road. If anyone's driven it, they know that there's a lot of patching going on there. Last week I spoke to staff and said that there's no plan to thoroughly pave the road for another 2 years. So I want to know, is this patching going to be that way for 2 years? And if so, I recommend that council members, particularly those in District 2, please drive the road yourself and make your own judgment on whether or not you should reconsider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Sudi, is that all general public comment?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, let's move on to our consent agenda. If you'll please sound those items.
First item is approval of the April 8th, 2019 City Council meeting minutes. Agenda item number 19082. Approval of the financial statements and investment report for the period ending March 2019. Agenda item number 19083. Next, approval of a professional services agreement between the City of Milton and United Consulting Group Ltd. Subsurface exploration restroom project at Providence Park. Agenda item number 19084. Our fourth consent agenda item is approval of a professional services agreement between the City of Milton and Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc. for modeling and visualization services, Crabapple Village and Lakeside at Crabapple Passive Park. Agenda item number 19085. Next, approval of a professional services agreement between the City of Milton and Designated Clippers Landscape Services, Inc., Bell Memorial Park Lacrosse Wall Project. Agenda item number 19086. Approval of a professional services agreement between the City of Milton and Topol Construction and Engineering, Inc., miscellaneous road projects. Agenda item number 19087. Approval of a task order to provide construction inspection services for the Northeast Crabapple Connector Project. Agenda item number 19088. Number 8 is approval of a task order to provide pre-construction and right-of-way acquisition services for Hopewell Road Corridor intersection projects. Agenda item number 19089. Next, approval of a task order to provide construction inspection services for the Birmingham Road West Bridge project. Agenda item number 19090. And our 10th and final consent agenda item this evening is approval of the following subdivision plat and revisions. Manor Phase 5B, King Preserve land lots 396 and 397, King's Close. Final plat revision to add 3 lots, 5 Fulton lots, total in Phase 5B. 6.431 total acres, 0.77 lots per acre. Wolf property, 1,000 Lackey, land lots 1014, 1015, 1016, 1017, and 1075, Lackey Road, minor plat. Combine 4 parcels, create 2 lots, 109.1 total acres, 0.018 lots per acre. This is agenda item number 19091.
Okay, do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for the approval of the consent agenda. Councilmember Bentley with a second from Councilmember Cookley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. And we'll move on to reports and presentations. Sudi, if you'll please call the first item.
This item is a proclamation recognizing Autism Awareness Month. This is being presented by Mayor Joe Lockwood.
Okay, tonight it's my honor and privilege to recognize April as Autism Awareness Month. The city has a rich history of promoting inclusion of persons of all abilities. We do that through events like tonight, where we're raising awareness of and promoting acceptance and understanding for those living with autism, and publicly sharing our support for their families and friends. We also do that throughout the year with city-sponsored committees and programs such as the Milton Disability Awareness Committee, Village Volunteers, and Milton Special Needs Summer Day Camp, Camp Joyful Souls. And we take advantage of opportunities to partner with local organizations like children's charities who are equally committed to inclusion. So much that they're raising more than $500,000 to bring an all-inclusive playground to Milton. I'd also like to thank all the members of the Milton community attending tonight's meeting. And now I'll read an official proclamation for Autism Month in April. Okay, I've got a proclamation recognizing Autism Awareness Month. Whereas autism is a developmental disability that typically appears during the first 2 years of life and continues throughout the individual's lifespan. And whereas 1 in 59 children are diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder annually, almost 4 times more boys, 1 in 37, than girls, 1 in 189. And whereas autism affects all ethnic and socioeconomic groups, and whereas early intervention affords the best opportunity to support healthy development and deliver benefits across the lifespan, and whereas autism creates significant stress on the families of those affected by autism and those families, caregivers, and advocacy organizations across the U.S. and around the world are striving to bring about positive changes for children and adults with autism. And whereas the City of Milton has a long history of raising awareness of and promoting acceptance and inclusion for all people throughout city-sponsored committees and programs such as the Village Volunteers, the Milton Disability Awareness Committee, the city's Camp Joyful Souls program, which is a summer day camp serving North Fulton families with special needs children aged 13 to 22 years old. Whereas we all have the responsibility to embrace our differences and promote acceptance and inclusion for all in schools and our communities. Now, therefore, we, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Milton, proclaim April as Autism Awareness Month in Milton and honor all Milton families who have been impacted by an autism diagnosis and applaud their efforts to stand up for autism. And this is given under my hand and seal of the City of Milton, Georgia, on the 22nd day of April 2019. And if the council would join me to present this proclamation and any families that are here.
Our guests can get wherever they're comfortable, and we'll have council fill in. There's plenty of room. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll get that from them.
Thank you so much. You guys have a good night, okay?
Thank you. That's so pretty. Yeah, that'd be fun. I can do that.
Okay, thank you all for being here again. It's an honor and a privilege for us. Sudi, if you please sound the next item.
Our next item this evening is presentation of the City of Milton Fiscal Year 2018 Annual Audit. Ms. Bernadette Harville.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Each year at the end of our fiscal year, we have an external audit team review our city books and present their analysis. Tonight we have with us Mr. Adam Fraley and Mr. Tim Lyons, both partners with the Malden and Jenkins firm, here to present the auditor's discussion and analysis.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I'm Adam Fraley. This is Tim Lyons. We're both partners in our governmental practice of Malden and Jenkins. As Ms. Harville mentioned, we'll be presenting the auditor discussion analysis this evening. You should have that in your packets. And what it is just a summary of the results of the audit as well as some of our required communications. I'm going to start on page 2. So this is some information about Malden and Jenkins in our governmental sector, which is growing, and we have a niche practice within our firm that specializes in serving governments year-round. Tim and I are both in that practice, where that's what we do year-round, and we have an expertise in there. I was engagement lead partner. Tim was the assurance partner, and we also had Justin Davis, who was our engagement manager. These are some of the other industries that we serve, as well as some other services we provide. And then on page 4, the financial statements, the city is required by law each year to prepare annual financial statements in accordance with Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. Our responsibility is to audit those financial statements and render an opinion on those. We conducted our audit tests, and we did render an opinion. In layman's terms, we called it a clean opinion, but it is technically an unmodified audit report. What that means is that based on our test work, that we believe the financial statements are materially correct for the year ended September 30th, 2018. In addition to what the state requires, the City of Milton also prepares a comprehensive annual financial report, which I'll refer to as a CAFR quite often. This page here talks about the additional information that's included in a CAFR. The biggest section there being the statistical section, which is going back in the history of the city and showing both financial and non-financial statistical information in there. And on the next page, the fact that the city gets an award through the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, for excellence in financial reporting based on their program requirements. So the city submits their CAFR each year and has gotten that award. And so, excuse me, so a big pat on the back to the city for going above and beyond what the state requires and doing a lot of extra work and putting together a beautiful document that conforms to not only Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, but those program requirements at that level. So a big pat on the back to the city's finance department for that. On the next page, starting to go a little bit into the financial statements just to hit some of the highlights of the numbers. The city ended its year with total assets of about $154 million, offset by liabilities of about $55 million, leaving about $99 million in net position or equity to the city. Of that, roughly $16 million is unrestricted net position, meaning it's available for future operations, et cetera. And other parts of that are either restricted or invested in capital assets, roads, infrastructure, et cetera. The statement of activities ended the year with about a $13 million addition to that net position or that equity. You'll see there for the year into September 3rd, 2018. That's all on a citywide basis. Down below there, we talk a little bit about the general fund being the main operating fund of the city. And you'll see in the graphs there, breakout of the revenues for the year, as well as on the following page here, we've got information about the breakout in that pie chart as far as the different expenditure categories that the city's general fund funds with those revenues. On the next page are a couple graphs. You can see this is going back 5 years of the general fund's revenues compared to expenditures and transfers to other funds. And so you'll see there in the top graph. And then the bottom one, you'll see the change in fund balance for the general fund and how that's behaved over the past 5 years as well. This year, with almost $7 million added to fund balance. The next couple pages, you'll see there are the kind of a Cliff Notes version to the financial statement footnotes. And so as you're looking at the CAFR, you can refer back here and see what each of those footnotes are telling the readers of the statements. That goes through on page 12. Starting on page 13, this gets into our required communications. And I'm not going to read each one of these to you, but I do want to just highlight a couple of the items. At the bottom of the page there, it talks about whether we're having significant difficulties with management. I always want to touch on this, as well as on the next page, whether we had any disagreements with management. And I'm happy to say that we had no such difficulties or disagreements with management concerning any accounting principles or things of that nature, or at all for that matter. Finance office and everybody that we encountered through our audit process were completely cooperative, getting us information timely, very helpful, and we very much appreciate that. Down toward the bottom of that page, it talks about audit adjustments. We did have some audit adjustments through the conduct of the audit. Those were agreed to with management, posted to the financial statements and the general ledger, and are reflected in the final CAFR, again, to make sure those are fairly presented. We had no past adjustments, which are things that maybe were identified but would be of an immaterial nature, but we had no such thing as well with that. The next page is where, so typically this is where findings are. If we had any findings, the standards set the bar and set the definition on what has to be any kind of control deficiency. We didn't have any findings related to significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. So again, huge pat on the back for the city there. That there was no findings that the standards require us to present in there. We did have a couple items that we refer to as management points, and they were kind of a byproduct of the audit, just from a standpoint of things that we felt we could recommend to assist with the city, maybe related to policy procedures, et cetera. And the first item there, cybersecurity risk, is obviously a risk in the world we all live in today, and it's a growing risk. And something there just as you're going through and doing risk assessment of all levels with the city, that is a growing threat. Trial balances, we had one minor item there where our trial balance was a very immaterial amount, was out of balance, and that's something we talked with management and worked with them as well on. Those are the only two management points. The remaining of the document is so GASB is the accounting standard setting body, and these are new GASBs that are coming out. And so if you're having trouble sleeping one evening, maybe you go through here. I'm not going to read them to you. But I do want to just say we try to keep clients, councils, as well as management kind of ahead of the curve as far as what's coming down the pipeline related to new standards that would be implemented in the financial statements. That goes through pretty much the remaining of the document. So that's the conclusion of my presentation, but if you've got any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer those.
Are there any questions for our auditors? Okay, as always, we appreciate your help and work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. And also, thank you to our finance staff, too, for all their hard and good quality work.
Thank you.
All right, if we can move on to our first presentation. Sudi, if you'd please read that item.
This item is consideration of an ordinance of the Mayor and Council of the City of Milton, Georgia, to adopt amendments to the fiscal 2019 budget for each fund of the City of Milton, Georgia, amending the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, amending the several items of revenue anticipations, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures to exceed actual funding available. This is agenda item number 19092.
Okay. Do I have a motion on the first presentation?
Mayor, I move we accept the first presentation items as read by the city clerk.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for approval of the first presentation from Council Member Longoria with a second from Council Member Morag. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous, Sudi. We have no items under public hearings. So, Sudi, if you'll please sound the first item.
Next, we have zoning. And I'm going to read some of the rules. At the second regularly scheduled meeting of the month, the Mayor and City Council consider a zoning agenda. These items include rezoning petitions, modifications of zoning, use permits, and associated concurrent variances, in addition to ordinances, resolutions, and text amendments. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures for the zoning items. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the position. Those called to speak will be taken in the order that the speaker cards were received by the city clerk prior to the beginning of tonight's meeting. If you are speaking on behalf of a group or organization, an affidavit must accompany your public comment card. Before beginning your comment, please identify yourself by name and address. We have one zoning item this evening. Consideration of RZ 1814, VC 1809, 3475, 3485, 3495, 3499, and 3501 Bethany Bend by Bayesian American Properties to rezone from TR and AG1 to TR to develop 54 residential units, condominiums at a density of 6.38 units per acre and a three-part concurrent variance to, first, delete the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback and replace with a 20-foot landscape buffer or 50-foot undisturbed stream buffer adjacent to all property lines abutting property zoned townhouse residential TR, section 64-1091B. Second, to delete requirement for 75% per vertical wall plane of brick or natural stone, section 64-1095O. And third, to delete requirement for 25% brick tile and remaining materials listed, section 64-1095P. Agenda item number 19006. This item was under first presentation at the January 7th council meeting, was diverted back to the Planning Commission at the January 23rd City Council meeting. First presentation was heard at the April 8th City Council meeting. Mr. Parag Agrawal.
Thank you, Sudi. You have done most of the work for me. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Parag Agrawal, City's Community Development Director. And today I'm here to present you the rezoning application number RZ 18-14/VC 18-09. I also have with me our zoning manager, Robin McDonald's. She has been the project manager and she has also authored the staff report, and she will be here to answer any questions from the city council members. Coming to the request, basically this rezoning application has two different parts. In the first part is the rezoning request to rezone a section of the property which is currently zoned as AG1 from AG1 to TR, that is townhouse residential, to develop 54 townhomes on 8.46 acres at a density of 6.38 units per acre. Basically, this property is split zoned. A section is zoned as AG1, a section is zoned as TR. So the applicant is proposing to rezone the AG1 part of this property to TR. The part 2 of this application is basically 3 concurrent variance requests. In the variance 1, the applicant is requesting to delete the 75-foot undisturbed buffer and 10-foot improvement setback requirements and to replace it with 35-foot landscaping buffer. So when this application came to our office in late fall of last year, the applicant was proposing a 20-foot buffer, but based on the feedback of the city staff, planning commission, and the neighborhood residents, this application and the site plan has evolved. So now the applicant is proposing a 35-foot buffer in place of 20-foot buffer. The second variance request is talking about the building materials to delete the requirement for 75% of brick or natural stone. And number third is to delete the requirement for 25% brick, tile, and remaining materials. Coming to the subject site, the subject site is shown by this red line on this map. This is the Bethany Bend Road, McGinnis Ferry Road over here, and this is the Forsyth County. The total site area is around 8.46 acres. Which is comprised of 6 individual parcels, and there are 4 existing single-family homes on the site. Out of this 8.46 acres, as I mentioned, 4.94 acres is zoned as TR, and the remaining 3.52 acres is zoned as AG1, that's agricultural. So this TR portion, so in 2008, the City Council approved the rezoning of this property for a section of this property from AG1 to TR to build a senior living facility at a density of 19.84 units. This property also lies in the State Route 9 overlay district. Coming to the surrounding conditions, this is our subject site. This is the Milton's Montessori School, which you can see in this picture. I will say that this site is surrounded by the multifamily residential units. We have the Hidden Forest subdivision at the back of this property. This Hidden Forest subdivision has 2 sections. This section in the front has all townhomes, which you can see in this picture. And this section at the back, which abuts this property, is single-family homes, which you can see in this picture over here. And although we do have these single-family homes, but these are not 1-acre lots. They are basically 8,000 to 10,000 square foot lots. This is the Spring Valley subdivision. This is Windcrest Parkway subdivision. And the numbers which you see over here is basically the density of these projects. Windcrest has a density of 6.76 acres, 6.76 units per acre. Spring Valley is around 7.86 units per acre. So I will say the proposed density of 6.38 units per acre is approximately similar to what we have in the surrounding conditions. Coming to the current zoning, as I mentioned, the property is split zoned. It is TR in AG1. As per our zoning code, TR basically is located adjacent to the single-family homes. It also provides a transition between single-family and non-residential areas. It allows duplex, triplex, and townhomes at a density of 9 units per acre. So today we received a number of phone calls asking what is the density allowed for TR zoning. So I will say the density allowed for TR is 9 units per acre. We all know what AG1 is. AG1 is basically our agricultural zoning that allows 1 unit per acre. Future land use, again, sort of a split zone. The light brown is MFR, that's multifamily residential. It was part of our 2011 land use plan. The remaining part, this dark brown, is HDR2. So again, we received some questions today asking what was the zoning before 2011 of this property. So we did take a look. So the Fulton County's land use map basically designated the land use for this that will have densities between 5 to 8 units per acre. Planning Commission reviews. This property has been reviewed by the Planning Commission, I think at least 3 times. In the last Planning Commission meeting on March 27, 2018, the Planning Commission members recommended approval for this project. They recommended approval for the rezoning part and also for 3 concurrent variances by a vote of 4-2. This project was also reviewed by the Planning Commission members at its February 27th meeting. At that time, the application was deferred because the Planning Commission members were looking for more public guest parking spaces. They were looking for a fencing between Hidden Forest and this proposed project. They wanted to look at the width of the internal roads, and they also wanted the applicant to submit the final architectural details to the office staff. So that's the reason why this project got deferred for the March meeting. This project was reviewed by the Planning Commission for the first time on December 19th, 2018. And at that time, the Planning Commission members recommended approval for the rezoning, and they also recommended approval for the variance request for the 75-foot buffer. But they recommended denial for the building materials variance. But after the December 19, 2018 meeting, some more project information was discovered that was not shared with the Planning Commission members on December 19th. So that is the reason the City Council members in their January 23, 2019 meeting, they again remanded this application back to the Planning Commission members. So that's the reason why the Planning Commission members again viewed this application in their February and March meetings. Now coming to this new site plan, the revised site plan. As I mentioned, this site plan has evolved over the last few months based on the feedback of the staff, the Planning Commission, and the neighborhood residents. So the final site plan which we have in front of us today, as you can see, this is the Hidden Forest subdivision at the back. The applicant is proposing a 35-foot buffer all the way, and this is a 75-foot buffer over here. So the minimum buffer is 35-foot landscaping buffer. Based on the neighborhood comments, the applicant has revised the site plan, and the neighborhood residents over here, they were not looking for a landscaping buffer. They were looking for an undisturbed buffer. So this will be a landscaping buffer, and this will be a 35-foot undisturbed buffer. Based on the feedback of the Planning Commission, the applicant is now proposing public parking spaces. They are proposing 26 public parking spaces, which you can see these locations. Around 1.4 acres of this site is wetlands in floodplain over here on this side. And the other difference is the last time you saw this site plan, now these homes, 23, 24, and 25 units, they are front-loaded. Last time when it came in front of you, all the units were rear-loaded, but this time these 3 units are front-loaded because they wanted to give enough buffer to this Spring Valley residents over here. So that's the reason why they were changing their orientation of these units. I have went through most of these points already, 35-foot buffer, 23, 24, and 25 units are now front-loaded. They're providing 26 visitors parking spaces. This is the landscaping plan which they have submitted along with this application. Although they are reducing the buffer from 75 foot to 35 foot, but they are providing enough landscaping buffer. This landscaping plan has been reviewed by the city arborist, and based on her recommendation, the plant materials being used for the 35-foot landscaping buffer are adequate for visual screening. I do not have the arborist with me today, but when the applicant comes here, we will ask him to focus more on this landscaping plan. This is the section which they have proposed. So this is the proposed project over here, and this is the hidden forest subdivision. So plan is one thing, but you can basically see in the section what is the distance between the hidden forest subdivision and the new project. And again, the applicant's landscape architect will be focusing more on the section, the landscaping plan. This is the site plan that came in front of you in the January meeting. Again, not much difference. At that time, they had 35-foot buffer. These units, as you can see, were rear-loaded. Now they're front-loaded. And this site plan also did not have any public parking spaces, which now they have it. So this project has a long history. A site plan came in front of the city council in 2008 for a section of the property, and it got rezoned from AG1 to TR as part of the use permit for developing a senior housing facility at a density of 19.84 units, 98 senior housing units, and it was a two-story building at that time. I will say this project did not requested a 75-foot buffer, and the applicant was never granted a 75-foot buffer to go ahead with this project, although it was part of the city's requirement. So the city of Milton changed the buffer requirement in April of 2008. So when this came in front of you, the applicant and the staff should have recommended a buffer variance, but the applicant never requested the buffer variance, and the city council never approved the buffer variance. And the second thing is, even if the variance is approved based on the city of Milton's code, the variance expires after 3 years, 36 months. So even if a buffer variance was approved for this property in 2008, it would have been expired because they did not ask for any extensions. So number one, a variance was never requested or approved. Even if it would have been accepted or approved, it would have expired by now. A site plan again came in front of you in 2014. At that time, the applicant was requesting a rezoning of the remaining part of this property from AG1 to TR, which is in front of you today. And at that time, the applicant was proposing 76 townhomes at a density of 7.47 units. So now the site plan which is in front of you is 54 units in place of 76 units. At that time, the applicant was requesting a variance from the 75-foot buffer requirement. But the applicant requested a withdrawal of this application, so the city council never denied or approved this project. Department's comments, it has been, as you must have seen in the report, it has gone through its regular review process. It has been reviewed by the transportation engineer. It has been reviewed by the city arborist. Public involvement. The applicant has met with the neighboring property owners a number of times, and I will say they have not only met the city code requirements, but they have far exceeded the city code requirements in meeting with the property owners. So a public participation meeting was scheduled for this property on October 13th, 2018. And there were some comments. There was a discussion about the reduction of the buffer space. There was also discussion about this new proposed traffic circle on the Forsyth County side. There were questions about when this traffic circle will get built. The city scheduled a CZIM meeting on November 27th, 2018. Around 11 people attended this meeting, and there were discussion about the increased traffic. People were concerned about the architectural details, and they wanted it to be consistent with the neighborhood. They wanted to have more public guest parking spaces. This project came in front of the Design Review Board meeting on December 4th, 2018. I will say the Design Review Board meeting was quite positive. The Design Review Board members appreciated the design of this project and they recommended approval. The applicant met the Hidden Forest community on January 19th, 2019, and it was attended by 5 residents, and those 5 residents are the ones who will be impacted the most from this project and they live in the Singer family part of the Hidden Forest subdivision. This is the letter which we received from these property owners, and this letter was positive, and these residents were quite satisfied with the proposed buffer and the landscaping treatment that's being proposed by the applicant. The applicant again met the Spring Valley Townhouse community on March 15th, 2019. And at that time, as I was saying to you for the site plan, the community members recommended an undisturbed buffer and not the landscaping buffer. So that is the reason why the applicant is now proposing a 35-foot undisturbed buffer and not the landscaping buffer. So this change is reflected based on the community input and the community feedback. Site plan analysis. As written in the staff report, this project meets the requirements of the development standards of the TR zoning. So the proposed zoning is TR, and this project meets the standards of the TR zoning. But the variances which are requested for this project is because of the overlay district. This project also lies in the State Route 9 overlay district. So that is the reason why they are requesting variances from the requirements of the overlay district and not of the TR zoning. As you know, whenever you analyze a variance, it's a 4-part test. Number 1 is the variance request should not offend the spirit or intent of the zoning ordinance. Number 2 is the hardship test that basically talks about the strict application of this zoning ordinance would create unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. Number 3 talks about the variance request should not cause a substantial detriment to the public good. And number 4 talks about the public safety, health, and welfare. So what we have done, it's all in the staff report. So we have created a summary that basically looks at each of these variance requests and trying to analyze based on our standards. So first is basically to delete the 75-foot undisturbed buffer requirement and to replace it with 35-foot landscaping buffer. So as you can see, the applicant is now proposing a 4-board equestrian fence between the Hidden Valley and this proposed project based on the feedback of the neighborhood residents. The revised site plan received on March 19th now shows a 35-foot buffer in place of 20-foot buffer as it was originally submitted. Number 3 is the 54 units at a density of 6.38 units is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. Number 4 is the site comprised of 6 parcels of various sizes and shapes that create 8.46 acres parcels. It's narrow, odd-shaped, and it contains 1.4 acres of floodplains on the site. And the last point is the amount of floodplain has only increased from the approved zoning in 2008. So basically, FEMA updates the floodplain maps. So based on the updated floodplain maps, the number of floodplains, the area of the floodplains has only gone up from 2008 rezoning. Now we are basically analyzing the variance request of the building materials. On this, this area of State Route 9 overlay district is not included in our form-based code. The applicant is seeking to build a less heavy look of predominantly brick and stone. The applicant has worked, I will say, very hard with the city's architect to make sure that the city of Milton's unique and identifying character is preserved and also enhanced. But at this time, the staff acknowledges, although it is a good design and the applicant has worked hard with the city architect, the design review board has also recommended approval, but there's no hardship clause to it. Again, the strict application of the zoning code will not create any significant hardship on the applicant. It's basically a good design. It's a good product. These are some of the elevations that were submitted to us, and I'm sure the applicant's architect will be talking more about these proposed elevations, but I will say the applicant has tried to create a village-type look. Although these are all townhomes, but these townhomes are of different materials, of different design. This is a 4-board fence in front. Again, it talks about different materials trying to create a less monolithic look. Some of the wider units are towards the front of the property, towards Bethany Bent Road. So it creates a more presence for this project on the road. And some of the narrower units are towards the back. And I'm sure applicant is also proposing, they also have materials in front of, with them today. So they can also present the building materials which they're proposing to the city council. Again, standards of review, I will not be going through all this. So the staff has analyzed this project for the rezoning part, and it does meet our criteria for the rezoning from AG1 to TR. So this is the staff's recommendation. So based on the staff's recommendation, the staff is recommending approval for the rezoning from AG1 to TR based on the proposed project which is in front of you today. We are also recommending approval. We are also recommending conditional approval for the variance request for the buffer, for the 75-foot buffer. But as I mentioned, for the building materials for part 2 and part 3, although we do acknowledge it is a good design, but there's no hardship. So again, it's the city council which is the policy maker, and you can always make a favorable recommendation. But from the staff's point of view, there's no hardship, although it's a good design. And these are the recommended conditions. They were also in the staff report. And these are the recommended conditions if the city council chooses to approve this project. That's it for me. I will be happy to answer any questions.
Parag, can you clarify the 75-foot buffer requirement? Is that based on zoning and the existing zoning with the applicant's request for the AG1 zoning or the overlay, the Highway 9 overlay?
So basic, and Robin, you jump in, okay? This is the requirement of the State Route 9 overlay district. So for any property which abuts the residential use, it's AG1 or any residential use, you need to have a 75-foot buffer. So it's not about what goes on this proposed site. It's more about it is abutting the residential property. So that is the reason why the city code requires a 75-foot buffer. It's a requirement of the overlay district, not the requirement of the TR zoning.
And that'd be 75 foot, no matter what the use was.
75 foot, yeah. And again, it's also about the property area. So this requirement is for properties which is more than 4 acres.
Okay. Any questions for Parag, Matt?
Yeah, on that line, would you know those surrounding neighborhoods as well? Do they currently have a 75-foot buffer? What is their buffer? They were built prior. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so my understanding is they were built prior to 2008. At that
Right.
time, it was a 40-foot buffer requirement. But Robin, do you want to add something?
So there hasn't been any recent development since the time we've become a city. So the last development was Hidden Forest that was zoned in Fulton County, and at the time was previously only required to do 40-foot buffers for their rear property line and 25 for their side property lines. So Hidden Forest, for example, adjacent to this property, was required to do a 25-foot undisturbed buffer because it was their side setbacks for that entire development. So, because this was originally AG1 when that was zoned.
Yes, and so the next question I would have too, speaking of the AG1, so we have a lot of TR surrounding this property that was mostly Fulton County in the past, but then we did our future land use plan to make this AG1 HDR2, and I think we have the form-based code and all this stuff. I'm just kind of curious, how did this AG1, being surrounded by all this stuff, how did we decide to keep it as AG1? Why was that not included in a higher density?
So this area was not included, maybe you mean to the form-based code?
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't go out and just rezone it on our own. But this area was not included because the area was not part of the LCI that was the original study for Deerfield.
Okay.
And then when we extended it on our own from Bethany Bend to the Forsyth County border, which was not included in the LCI, it was decided at that point not to include this portion of these properties into the Deerfield form-based code, although it's fairly near, but it was not included in the Deerfield form-based code.
Was that a staff recommendation at the time? I'm just curious.
I can't really address exactly the reason. There was a whole committee and there was all sorts of meetings, so I wouldn't be able to give you an accurate reason why it wasn't included.
Okay, so the next question I have is with the comprehensive land use plan that we did for the 2035 comprehensive plan. Obviously, there's a future land use plan that had increased the density from AG1 of that particular parcel to HDR2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was split. It was split between two different land use designations. So,
Which you have in front of you, you cannot see this, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why they.
So basically, the portion that was zoned in 2008 for the senior housing was designated as multifamily residential because that's basically at 19 units per acre. That's reality what it is.
Right.
The remainder of the parcels were assigned to high-density residential 0.2, which is 5 to 8 units per acre, which is consistent with the other developments surrounding it. As Mr. Agarwal showed you, that there's other townhouse residential developments that are similar or even higher than this one as you go up Bethany Bend. So that's the reasoning, I believe, that they assign the HDR to for the other parcels outside of the original senior housing.
Okay, and so the AG1 that was in place, there was a committee to create the future land use plan that decided to designate this a higher density plan for the future land use plan to HDR2. And then that plan went through with our citizens and council vote, et cetera, including that in 2016, correct?
Correct. It went through all of the CPAC and through Planning Commission as well as the council.
Okay.
Okay, correct. That's not 2016.
Joe, I think you had a question, Joe?
Yeah.
Clarify that.
The property is, excuse me, the property's got an irregular shape to it, and actually at one point is pretty, I would say the depth of the property is not that great. I have some concerns related to the edges of the property because a 75-foot buffer, when applied around the perimeter, sometimes overlaps and makes whole pieces of a piece of property unbuildable. Do we know what the buildable space is if we didn't change the 75-foot setback or buffer?
So I have the site plan in front of me right now. If they can put the site, here you are. No, so here you are. This is the 35-foot buffer. I think this is what you are saying. This part is narrow. So this is the 35-foot buffer line right now. So again, if this 35-foot again moves here, so we assume this will come on this street. The 75-foot buffer line, this line will come on the street. So this will be this narrow part which you were mentioning. So I do not know exactly what will be the buildable will be, but it will be quite narrow.
Yeah, I mean, just visually looking at it, we take away at least half the space on that front piece.
Yes.
The wetlands area, there's nothing going in there anyway, so that's sort of remains the same. This corner up at on the diagram in the northern section across where the blue line is. I mean, when you apply 75 feet in that little area right there, you probably cut out most of that area. So did we do any analysis of the number of units that they could get if the variance wasn't granted?
So as I mentioned, they currently have TR zoning. So again, TR basically allows 9 units per acre, and around 4.54 acres is zoned as TR. So I will say around 40, it can fit in around 40 units based on the density. But they also have a buffer of 75-foot buffer. So they might not be able to fit in those 40-something units. So again, no, I do not have that analysis that basically shows. We never got that site plan that shows what can fit in.
I will just go with significantly less.
Significantly less, sir.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Peyton, did you have a clarification?
Yeah, the only clarification is, when you mentioned the comp plan in 2016, this wasn't discussed in 2016. It had been the prior comp plan, correct?
2011.
Okay.
But yes, so it was part of 2016 also. That was coming from 2011.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions at this point for staff?
I have a question. Prague, can you restate the information specifically that was when we remanded it back to the Planning Commission? Could you just restate that for me?
So basically, at the Planning Commission meeting in November, the city staff made a statement in front of the Planning Commission saying that in 2008, the applicant requested a 75-foot buffer variance. It was requested and it was approved. But when we again did some more research, we found out that in 2008, this 75-foot buffer was never requested and was not approved. So we just wanted to make sure that the Planning Commission members are also aware that no buffer was approved in 2008. I do not know what amount of significance they were placing on this statement, but just for the sake of transparency, we just thought it's better that they should again review this application.
Any questions for now?
Yeah, for now.
Okay. Rick?
Prague, would you be able to show me on the site plan where the part that was already zoned TR was and where they're assembling the other parcels? Can you show me how that fits on this site plan?
Yes. So although I do not have that line, what we have seen, if you basically extend this line over here, you can see the cursor, right? Yes. So if you can basically extend this line all the way till here, so this part on the southern part was zoned as TR, and this part is all AG1 right now. So if you look at here you are. So this thing which you have, this is sort of a cutoff line. This is TR, this is AG1. So in 2008, the applicant was proposing a senior living facility on this TR part, not on this AG1.
Okay, so the odd shape where it kind of goes and zigs and zags,
Yes.
that's with the assemblage of the other properties. That's not something that was already
No.
zone TR
Yes.
in the past.
Yes. So right now there are 6 parcels. This property over here, which it's 8 point something acres, it's 6 parcels right now. So the cutoff is basically TR. Here you are. So again, all this part is already zoned as TR, and the part at the top is zoned as AG1 right now.
Okay. And again, have plenty of time for questions after the
Thank you.
applicant speaks. Okay. Thank you, Parag. First, we'll hear from those that are speaking in support of this application. Sudi?
So we have one comment card, and that's from Colin Mary. And he would like to say, with the agreement with the developer on a landscape buffer, we, the single-family homeowners, favor their development versus previous plans put forward. And he resides at 140 Peacock Way. And then we have one that is in opposition, and that is Judy
Hold one
Birds.
second, too. Ken, just procedure, we probably need to let the applicant speak in support, correct or not?
Yeah, we would let the applicant
Then
speak.
we'll do those that not in support.
That's correct.
Opposition. Okay. So I'll open up to if the applicant wants to speak.
Thank you.
Let me just load up a gem drive real quick. Good evening. My name is Steve Rome with AEC 50 Warm Springs Circle, Roswell, Georgia, and I'm here representing Bayesian American Properties. With me is Carrie Krause, the project architect, and I'm going to reserve most of the time for her to kind of go through the architectural pieces of this, so that's more lengthy than the site plan. I just want to walk through the site plan real quick in that we're going to be entering off the proper, or the traffic circle is about nearing completion currently. This property does have wetlands in the back that we are preserving with a significant floodplain that came about over the last 10 years in the latest flood study. The previous flood study had this as an unstudied reach, so there was no floodplain that was listed on FEMA with an elevation. With regards to the roads, we increased the road width to the fire marshal's minimum there, so that was a little bit of a change, but it worked out for the better. And then the additional parking spaces here are shown throughout the area with either driveway spaces or on-street parking. So there's 26 on parking, and then there's an additional 45 units that have 2-car garage and 2 cars in the driveway. Wanted to reserve most of the time to talk about this buffer that is increased. We have been able to get it beefed up quite a bit from where it had started to. And what I wanted to talk about is in these various sections, just talk about the plant material that we were proposing. We've got a heavy evergreen planting mix. It would be 75% evergreen, 25% deciduous, so that it didn't have an artificial look of all evergreen. We wanted to kind of give it a little bit of an interest throughout the year. We've got magnolias for the high canopy screening. We've got some native hollies. We've got also Burford hollies. We've got cherry laurels. We're trying to be native and naturalized within our plant material palette, trying to make sure that we're giving a good screen to the homeowners on the opposite side as well as our own homeowners, along with the fence that will be put into those areas. In addition to that, we've got the understory trees that will add some interest that do well in the shade, and then add the colors, the red buds, the service berries, things along those lines. At this point, I'd like to just turn over the mic to Carrie Krause, and then when she's done, I can answer any questions you may have on the site plan.
Good evening. I'm Carrie Krause. I'm the architect who created Malou, and I'm a specialized environmental architect. I live at 3464 Roxborough Road in Atlanta, 30326. And I'm really excited about this project. It's my first project in Milton. Before I began conceptualizing it, I spent a lot of time, about 3 months, researching your community, your history. I drove all throughout your entire city and noticed the architecture that is existing, new as well as old, the surrounding neighborhoods. So there was quite a bit of research done. And I'm very proud to present this project. I'm proud not only of my work, but I'm proud that the community, the Design Review Board, the Planning Commission, all of our neighbors around this project, they have all been very favorable and advocates of this development. So Malou means social environment. It's French, and what is interesting about this is that we created a diverse community. So it's diverse in scale of the units themselves, which allows a diversity of family dynamics, economics, and that was really important with designing this community. That's why it's named Malou. It's a social environment. Another thing I'd like to point out that was very important as an environmentalist is that we have a lot of preserved green space. So throughout the community, when you notice the site plan, you don't see this large, massive green space that gets everything nice and neat and under code. You see green space all throughout the different units and the different buildings, which allows community involvement, allows community social experiences. And so I just wanted to point out all of that idea of this community because I think it's important when you're designing a development to think about how the community members live. And this has been designed very thoroughly to allow a very harmonious, balanced neighborhood. And I think you should be proud of it. So let's see here. These are the renderings, and as you come in off the street, you are on a sight line of one of the stronger green spaces, which actually we've created concepts with fire corrals, pergolas throughout with benches, and a lot of really shared experiences. I did work very closely with Bob, the city architect, and he really wanted a pedestrian-friendly, open community. You're going to see a lot of sidewalks. He wanted this streetscape to be stronger on Bethany Bend, so that's where you see all the larger units. At first, I really wanted to design a single-family community, and we went this direction, but as you'll see, a lot of these units are quite large and definitely can accommodate single-family. We also have what I would call your main living on the first floor, so we can have empty nesters. We have some really interesting concepts where you can have young executives who are up and coming throughout Milton living here. So it's interesting. Some of the units go from 1,800 square feet up to 3,600 square feet. So we really stuck to that vision of diversity. So as we go through here, I want to show you, let me get back here. Here we go. I just want to give you a feel. I think it's important because so much of what I fought for was this materials variance, 75% vertical wall of masonry. And it just felt like we were going backwards architecturally throughout Milton. When you look at your library and you look at all the brand new developments that are coming up and some of the newer homes that have just been built and the ones that are in permitting process right now, there's not a 75% masonry on the vertical walls. And that's because, we missed the form-based code, the form-based zoning. So I just want to show you some of the ideas. So we have some really neat, progressive, innovative materials. This roof here has a 50-year warranty. It's a synthetic slate. We do have a lot of natural stone. All the water tables throughout all the buildings have a consistent masonry. And as you saw in the renderings, a lot of the vertical walls do pop up into solid masonry, not just 75%. If you actually look at each unit, which I have provided specifications, in-depth specifications if you want to take the time, there is quite a bit of natural stone on this project. We changed the things around. We have solid wood doors. We have some wood frame windows. We have some black framed windows. We have limestone lintels. We just have we have some neat wood siding notes, some copper chimney pots. There's just a lot of design and architectural elementation here. And the inspiration behind that was I embraced your equestrian history. I also embraced your cotton yielding history. A lot of these materials, like I said, I'm an environmental architect, but a lot of my training was in Europe. So I think you'll appreciate this village concept. It's very European. And when you think about equestrian, you think about cotton yielding, you think about early colonization, it's definitely rich in European architecture. So I feel like this community is actually more historically relevant than some of the things I've actually seen that are around some of the what I would call more established architecture in Milton. I feel like we're going back. We're embracing the true history architecturally.
Can I interrupt 1 second?
Sure.
Ken, I want a point of order. I believe we may be out of time. What do we need to do on the time? We need to address that.
We'll either need to have the council make a motion to extend, which would be applicable to both sides.
Okay, that would, the council, obviously, as we've done in the past, could extend some time on the for those in favor, and then also it would equally add more time on the other side. Is council okay with that? Maybe 5 minutes on either side?
Sure.
So do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve an extension of 5 minutes on both sides.
Second.
All right, I have a motion. Councilmember Kuntz, who was that? Councilmember Longoria? Second for additional 5 minutes on either side. Discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
It's unanimous. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, so I'm just going to slide you through some of these. We also brought in some metal seam roof materials in a dark bronze tone. The walls that you see in siding, the material is incredible. It's 15-year warranty. It's color fast. And if I brought it up to you, which we have the sample, you would not know that it wasn't true wood. It has such beautiful texture, but it's environmental. I'm a LEED certified environmental architect, so it's very important that all the materials pass that philosophy forward in your community. So I just will finish this up. This white brick, this chalk brick, we used it extensively throughout. And I'm sure you all have been through Alpharetta. I'm sure you've been through Roswell, and you're seeing the use of brick, but painted white. Well, this brick actually is much better than that. It's got tonality of grays and whites. It looks like it's been there. And again, embracing the European feel, all these units have different projections and elevations. It is not a row like you typically see in townhome developments. Each unit looks like its own unit, and they've all been homogenized into this European village. The shutters were inspired by the equestrian influence. You're just going to see a lot of the barnwood. I actually have some siding that looks reclaimed barnwood for some of the open-end gables. Again, just embracing your history. And that's pretty much that on that level. I have a slideshow, but I'll reserve it unless you want to see it. They're basically images, and there is no hardship case on the architecture side of this variance. But I will say it's a strong argument. I'm trying to develop and build something that you've already embraced in your city, in your architecture, in your own municipality buildings, that's historically relevant, that's quality. A lot of townhomes you see, they'll do vinyl siding or they'll do hardy board on the sides and you'll just see a brick front. And yeah, that passes code, but it's, it's not quality and it doesn't look authentic. So this development's very authentic. When you see a material choice in the water table of these triplexes, quadplex, the duplexes, it carries all the way around. And if you see a vertical unit, it carries the same material. So there's just not this cookie cutter short, cutting corners type of architecture. It's very authentic, very relative to your history, and the materials are all environmental. And I just can't imagine you denying this architecturally. So it's the way of the future. You can go through Alpharetta, you can go through Buckhead, you can see this architecture. There's a movement, and I'm very happy for it because it's about time that we start building things that are historically relevant, that have what I call timeless design. And so that's really all I have, unless you have questions.
Okay. I think we'll open up to questions here after everyone's through speaking. So thank you very much. Okay. Do we have anybody else in support?
That's all.
Okay. Then we'll open up to any one in non-support.
And that would be Judy Birds.
The good news is I will not take 15 minutes. So. My name is Judy Birds. I live at 1165 Breen Drive. I've been a resident here in Milton for over 12 years, almost 12 years. I'm learning that what happens in Milton in one part really does affect all of Milton. I know most of the time that I've been before you, it's been about the area in which I live. But I felt after I listened to the Planning Commission meeting on this, more of interest in another topic that I felt I needed to speak. The buffer reduction and construction material change request, in my opinion, and I hope in your opinion, do not meet the requirement for hardship. The challenge with the southern parcel development, that which is now TR zoned, is an investment risk. The commercial developer should have done its due diligence regarding buffer requirements and the potential for the expansion of the wetlands. It's an investment risk. He's a sophisticated developer. It's a risk he takes. It's not a hardship. My understanding is that the northern parcels that are currently zoned AG1 have not even been purchased yet. It kind of perplexes me of how you could claim a hardship when you haven't even made an investment yet. He's hoping, I believe, to get it done so he can complete that purchase. Milton's are in place to protect neighboring developments. They are crucial and should not be reduced. In this case, the request is being made to reduce the buffers by more than half, from 75 feet to 35 feet. This is not could you give me 5% so I could fit another unit? This is more than half. On the other note, Milton's building material standards are critical. I grew up in a cedar-sided house built in the 1890s. The neighboring house was built in 1870. It was built of brick. In our house with the wood siding, we were constantly scraping, cleaning, repainting. It seemed like a constant work. And just when we'd get done, we'd have to start over again because it already looked worn. The older brick house next door to us required far, far less upkeep and always looked in good condition. In my current four-sided brick home, I just scrubbed the mildew off my wood window trim. Sorry, if you could see my nails, you'd know I had. I have not had to do any cleaning of my brick. I think we have to consider in these units that a lot of times, I know when I lived in a townhouse previously, I did not spend a lot of time on the exterior of my home. I was a busy professional, I did not have time to do that kind of upkeep. A brick house looks good with minimal upkeep, as well as stone. And I would encourage you, especially for this development and for the standards of Milton, to keep those standards in place. So the applicant's request for variances should be denied. As far as the zoning request, it falls within the overlay plan, so it could be approved, in my opinion. But I would be cautious, as the current property owners would likely want to preserve the AG1 zoning if the variances and when the variances are denied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any more public comment?
That's all, sir.
All right, I will close the public hearing on this, and I'll open back up if council has any questions for staff or the applicant. Joe, and then Rick.
So, the current situation that we have is that the property that is zoned TR is sort of the less developed component. The property that currently isn't zoned TR is where a good portion of the development is going to go in place. I don't think I have a problem with the zoning, okay, because it's the current AG1 is surrounded by TR across the street. It gets even more dense when you look at what's going on in Forsyth County. So I'm pretty cool on that piece. What I don't understand and what I'm trying to figure out is how, in my mind, all the variances are accompanied by some type of hardship requirement. How can staff recommend approving one and not approving the other two? And I want to make sure that I understand what parts 1, 2, and 3 are, because based on the language here, part 1 is the setback and buffer requirement. Part 2 is the wall change, and part 3 is the brick tile change. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what is the hardship for 2 and 3 that, or I'm sorry, I said that the wrong way. What's the hardship for one that exists that doesn't exist for 2 and 3?
Yes. So basically, I will say the variance is always project specific. It's basically case by case basis. Number one, as council member, you only mentioned the hardship. What we think for the buffer requirement is the shape of this property. As you basically brought it up, if you are having this 75-foot buffer, it basically reduces the half. It basically takes away half of the property. That's one. That's not the case with the building materials. Although it's a good design, as the applicant's architect just stated, but still you can go ahead with the regular building materials, which is there in the State Route 9 overlay district. Number second, I will say it's about the intent of the code. Although it says 75-foot buffer requirement, as one community member just mentioned, you're going down from 75 to 35. So it's a significant reduction of the buffer space. It's a number. But if you look at the landscaping plan between residential units and the proposed residential, the staff thinks that this buffer, although it's not 75 foot, but it does give enough visual screening. So again, because of the shape of the property, you do have a hardship, and plus what they're proposing, they are trying to mitigate this reduction of the buffer, and the way they have designed that landscaping buffer, that will help to visually screen the neighboring properties with this proposed use. So it's a dual thing. It's a reduction because of the shape, and also about the solution which they're proposing.
Okay, so we review all of these requests in a vacuum. In other words, what we decide here isn't based on something that we decided elsewhere, and what we decide elsewhere won't be based on what we decide here, okay? However, just humor me. Do we have a situation in the past where the amount of reduction, the amount of distance that we took out of the undisturbed buffer was at the same scale, at the same level? What is the rationale? How did we come to 35 feet is still okay? You know, what process did we go through to determine what was acceptable?
So again, it depends upon the landscaping solution which the applicant was proposing. So instead of 35 foot, if they would have been proposing 45 foot and no screening. So maybe the city arborist and the city staff would have reviewed and they said, okay, although it's 45 foot, it's more than 35 foot, but they are not providing any screening. But in this case, they were providing 35 foot of screening and the city staff thought, although it's not that number, but it does meet the intent of the code.
Okay.
But the thing which you said, I think what you are looking for, historically, have we reduced this buffer from 75 foot to something, right? That's what you are trying to ask.
Yes, it's more than a 50%
It's more than
drop.
50% reduction. Robin, do you know of any other?
I caught me off guard a little bit. So I'm not going to tell you exactly because I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to do some research. I do know that there have been buffer variances, especially for use permits done in the past. And that typically would be in the rural Milton area. But again, I don't have specific scenarios for you. But I would also like to interject that we have a number of acreage that differentiates between a 50-foot undisturbed buffer. So if it's less than 4 acres, then you're only required to do 50. And then if it's 4 or more, it's 75 feet. And the 10-foot improvement setback. And I would argue that, just like you said, a lot of the development is in an area that is, closer to 4. I mean, I believe that it's not only looking at the numbers, but to look at the situation. And in addition to what Parag was saying, I'd also say that they've included a lot of open space for the development, for the residents. And if you looked at the open space, that actually creates more, you could say, buffer that we're not really accounting for. So I think looking at this development overall, it provides the type of open space that we're striving for each development. And I think that makes it for a better development for those residents, and that the applicant has worked very closely with the adjacent property owners to make sure that they're satisfied with what's being provided. And so thus far, we have gotten support from the adjacent property owners, even the ones in other townhouse developments that are at a higher density adjacent to them. So,
Carol, Rick next, but Carol, you want a clarification on that question?
Well, I'll wait till after. I have a couple clarifications.
Rick, go ahead.
Okay. So if it was a smaller parcel, before you did the assemblage, they would be required to do a 50-foot buffer, undisturbed buffer?
That's correct.
Okay.
But even for this TR, the TR portion is 4-point-something acres. So even with this 4.52 acres, they would have gone to 75-foot buffer because as Robin mentioned, the cutoff is 4 acres, right? So 4 acres or more 75-foot buffer. So even if they're building a TR right now, they will have to go with 75-foot buffer because it's more than the threshold.
Okay, so even the existing TR zone property would require 75-foot undisturbed, and it's an undisturbed buffer?
Right. So traditionally, we've had an undisturbed buffer, but we've, over the years, amended it to encourage not just to be undisturbed, because if there's nothing there, that's pretty pointless.
Right.
So we typically allow it to be not technically undisturbed. We like to supplement it with additional plantings to provide the visual buffer that's the intent of this zoning buffer. It's not just a setback,
right,
but the intent is to be a visual buffer. So I guess if all situations were perfect, you would have a really beautiful, wonderful buffer that you couldn't see through, but that's typically not the case. So we need to ask the applicant to supplement that buffer into additional plantings.
Okay, so understand the intent. So the law says basically, here's what our zoning ordinance requires. It's 75-foot undisturbed buffer. If it's sparsely vegetated, we would try to encourage the developer to actually add things to make it more amenable. But the 75-foot buffer, if we go back to when we originally did this, was for protection of subdivision to subdivision, because we have things built with just a small setback or an improvement setback and a small buffer in the past. I think that's where, and Peyton, you may be able to speak a little bit more, but I think that's where we.
Can I just make a little correction? It's not
Sure.
it's not subdivision to subdivision. It's the use to the use.
Use, okay.
So it wouldn't be between two single-family
Okay.
residential subdivisions.
Okay, so in this case, though, it would still be required a 75-foot undisturbed buffer. That's what I guess the law is. Can you tell me with the topography? Is it pretty flat at the back of that parcel, the existing TR, and what type of vegetation do you have on that in the buffer area?
We've made a visit with one of our arborists, city arborists, and it's fairly dense, but it's not with large trees. I think there's a lot of privet. There's a lot of smaller size trees, but it creates a buffer. But once you start, cleaning it out, it would be reduced, and that's why the applicant is proposing to insert much better type plantings. And if you want to ask him, he could probably go into more detail about what that is. But if you go out to the site right now, it's the visual buffer is kind of there, but it's a lot of stuff that probably is not what you would want to be growing in that buffer. So
it does. It looks pretty dense right now. Yeah.
Okay. And that. Okay. The other question, they requested the variance, and we heard from the architect that these are going to be different types of materials that are more, in her mind and what she's expressing as more aesthetically appealing versus when we first came up with Highway 9 overlay. And I know some of us were involved at that point. We were concerned because of the type of commercial building and buildings we were getting, including residential that had vinyl siding and some of the things. So we said we have to put rules there to try to improve the product, because those of us who live in that area saw what was being approved by Fulton County and what was going in. So what we have there today, that wasn't zoned. None of that was zoned when we had City of Milton. I don't think any of that construction along there was City of Milton. Is that correct, along Bethany Bend?
this lower part of Bethany Bend you're speaking of, or the one?
The portion
The
along
only thing that
Bethany
was
Bend
under
over to Highway
development.
9.
The Hidden Forest was under development. It was being built.
Right.
Everything else pretty much existed
prior.
of those TR developments.
Okay, right, and that was Fulton County. If the variance was granted on the building materials, do we have a list of how would we enforce that?
Yeah,
So
so
it sounds good, it looks good. How
Yeah.
do you enforce that to make sure that in fact that if we make a variance, it's not so broad that we don't end up with a product that we.
Yes, so in our
see.
staff report, the applicant has provided a list of materials, and they've also shown where those materials will go. So yes, the enforcement can be done. And I will also mention one more point. Even DRB, they did appreciate this good design, and they also encouraged the staff that we should look at changing our standards for the overlay district. So that was part of it. Just want to let you know.
Would this go, once they actually, let's say this was approved, whatever the final plan is, if the variance was approved on the building materials, would this go back before the DRB once they actually pull the site plan and they start to do the building?
Yeah.
Yeah, so all TR, multifamily, or the row houses, townhouses, each set of buildings have to be approved by the design review board. So unlike single-family detached, which does not have a requirement to go to the DRB, these townhomes will each building, set of buildings, whether it's a set of 4 or a set of 3 or a set of 6, they all will go to the DRB if it was to be approved.
So that would have to be approved then by the DRB, by building. You take a look at the type of materials, et cetera.
Right.
It would not be, yes, we go ahead and build what you want to build. They actually would come before.
Yeah, they would.
and
Yes, excuse me.
present.
They would use whatever, if you were to approve this, the conditions, and we have that in the staff report. These are the conditions that the Planning Commission recommended approval, and we try to make it as general as possible, but good enough to be able to still get the point across of what the style and the design they want. And that's what the good part is that it would have to be required to go to the DRB for their final approval prior to a building permit issuance.
Okay, so that would be the way we enforce it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Carol?
So the total amount of acreage under build, excluding the wetlands, the total amount under build is how much?
The wetlands is 1.4 acres, and the total site is around 8. What's the total site? 8.46 acres. So if you basically subtract 8.46 by 1.4, so it's basically seven-ish acres.
7-ish?
Seven.
I'm good with that.
7.02 acres.
7.06.
7.06 acres.
And you mentioned green space. So of the 7 acres, and what do we have, 54 units on 7 acres?
Yes, they're proposing 54 townhomes.
Right.
How much of that then in acreage or in square footage is green space?
Okay, so in their site plan, with all the changes that they made, the amount of green space, so we make a requirement in our ordinance that there be 1,000 square feet of open space per unit, and that would be 54,000 square feet, which is it's a bit over an acre, and then provided is 55,924 square feet, which is almost 56,000. So you're looking at about an acre and a quarter that they're providing in open space. In addition, so that does not include the buffer. So we can't, when we look at open space, they're not allowed to include the undisturbed buffer or the landscape strip or landscape buffer.
So this number includes the wetland area, no, right? This does not include.
Correct. It includes the wetland area, it includes the trees that are in the front that they're preserving, as well as all the open green areas around interspersed in the development.
Okay. I like the building materials. A fan of what I see. I'm struggling with the buffer a lot. That was it. Okay.
Matt?
So, refresh my memory as well. Has the 75-foot buffer been in place since our city's inception for all new developments?
Sorry.
Explain the history of that.
So this 75-foot buffer was recommended by the City Council in April of 2008.
In April 2008. What was it prior to 2008?
So the prior to that would have been another section of the code that we mentioned. It was anytime a new development, their rear property line or rear setback would provide a 40-foot, and then sides would provide a 25-foot.
Okay.
And so it didn't deal with acreages, it just dealt with the setbacks. I don't know if that's clear or not, but it was less than what is currently required.
That's all.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Peyton?
You said the buffer requirement was April 2008. When was the property purchased by the applicant?
So we met with the applicant in June of 2008, and they submitted their application in July.
Okay. They applied for a variance in 2015 to reduce the buffer, and staff recommended denial in 2015. Based on your comments on your approval, because of the shape of the property and it takes up half the property, what has changed since 2015 to today?
Yeah.
So let me take this, and then Robin, you can add to it. So as I mentioned, each variance request is on a project-by-project basis. It's a case-by-case basis. So we are recommending we are recommending approval for this variance request based on the project which we have in front of us right now. We are also looking at the mitigating factors, how they are trying to, although they are reducing the buffer, but how they are trying to come up with a solution that will help us to have some visual screening between the Hidden Valley subdivision and this project. I'm just giving you an example. If a commercial project comes on this site, or if a big commercial project comes on this site, then maybe the staff might not recommend approval of this buffer It's not like since we are recommending approval for a buffer variance for this project, if after 2 years a commercial project pops up on this site, we will again have to recommend approval of the variance request at that time also. Because it's a project by project basis, we think this is a good project that although it's not requiring a 75-foot buffer, but it does come up with a good solution. I know, Robin, you also want to add to it.
So previously in the 2015 application, the application was proposing 75 units. It had a little bit more acreage because they had under contract what now is the new Montessori school. So I just want to make that clear. It was a little bit larger. But they were proposing 77 units. There was not, it just was too many units in staff's opinion, and therefore we recommended denial of the variance because also they were only proposing a 20-foot undisturbed buffer instead of up to 35. So
you also had a language in the staff report, right?
Right, so that basically that if the application had less townhomes, then it would be appropriate, or we could look at the variance and more closely.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to get an argument on, is it 54 and you approve a buffer? Is it 76 you don't approve a buffer? What do you do at 62? So I don't want to get into that. I guess my question is, and let me know if it's true or not, nothing's changed. The city has not put any constraints on the property since the property owner has purchased it, correct?
Wasn't there a change in the floodplain?
Yeah, but the only change is the floodplain, but we have not put any new requirements.
Okay, Laura?
A couple of questions. The Spring Valley, Windcrest, Hidden Forest, those neighborhoods were all the densities approved by Fulton County, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. It's because you went to a lot of trouble to detail the surrounding residential densities, but they were done by Fulton County, as well as the preserve at Deerfield. So we have one neighborhood, Hidden Valley, that has on the southern side, those residents have the benefit of a 75-foot buffer, and then on the west side, they have the 35-foot buffer. And from a planning perspective, y'all are okay with that?
With what they're proposing, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I only have a few more questions for the applicant.
Okay.
Just now.
Hey there. Thank you.
Sure.
The site is comprised of 6 parcels, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. It's an assemblage.
Okay. And does the applicant own all the parcels currently?
I believe he owns a portion of them, about half, and not all of them.
Not all of them. Okay. On page 26 of our 38-page packet, there was a document called the Townhome Support from Spring Valley.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with that? Okay. I'm interested in the writing at the bottom. It looks like it was signed by 3 property owners. And the detail description, was that written by you all or by
It was not me. I'm the planner engineer. Let me get the owner up because he was part of that process of getting that signature on that document.
Okay.
Good evening. Corey Jones, 14430 Wyndham Farms Drive in Milton. I met with the Spring Valley subdivision, and they are the ones that executed that. The main gentleman is a planner with Fulton County, and he's the one that did the drawings on Exhibit A. And I will just point out that he indicated that if it's feasible, he would like these things to happen. And I'm okay that it's included in the staff report as a required condition. I'm okay with that.
Okay. So my question was that he references within the 75-foot undisturbed buffer. So that's you're requesting to delete it. So
I would have to look at his writing.
Yeah.
If we could bring it up somehow.
Yeah. I just wanted to, because that led me to believe that there might have been a misunderstanding in that communications.
Yeah, if we're referencing him, if we could bring him up so we could see that. Is that somewhere? Oh, thank you. So reduce the building 23, 24, 25 footprint from 45 to 40 in depth per Exhibit A. Minimize clearing limits and grading within the 75-foot undisturbed buffer to within 10 plus beyond buildings 23, 24, 25.
That was my expression when I read it too. I was confused because he mentions a 75-foot buffer that's being deleted. So I guess my question is, I know that you went to a lot of trouble to meet with the adjacent property owners. That's a blind spot for me. I'm not sure the public comment that gentleman mentioned, a previous plan. I've never seen a plan with anything but a 20-foot buffer. So if the adjacent property owners were shown those plans, they might have misunderstood. So that's my point and my question.
I will point out that this is the letter that I presented to them as it is written, and this is what they actually executed.
Okay.
And I referred to a 35-foot landscape plan. But I appreciate your comments.
Okay, I just wanted to try to clarify that, and I appreciate you going to that trouble. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions for the applicant or questions for staff? Joe?
Yeah, so I have a question for the applicant as well. And it's sort of the part of this that I'm really having difficulty wrapping my head around.
Yes, sir.
And that is, how do we claim a hardship for something that existed when you purchased the property?
Well, and part of it was communication because the ordinance was new. We had a pre-app meeting. It wasn't brought up. We didn't know to ask for it. We didn't ask for it in the beginning, but we showed it like we're getting the variance. We're getting a variance to that setback. If this was a townhome to a TR to TR without being in the overlay, the buffers would be closer to what we're asking for now than they would be with a 75. The reason for the 75 is because we're in an overlay district against outside of the overlay district, even though we have very similar uses.
So we created this after you purchased the property?
It was almost concurrent. We had gone through our zoning process with the assumption that there was the setbacks were more of a traditional setback buffer situation. We went through the process, got the approval for the original 4 acres, and then unfortunately recession hit. We were about to go start on that, and then the economic world fell apart. So then we came back in 15, and then that was when it was brought up. Oh, you're in an overlay. We have to get a buffer variance to the exterior buffer within the overlay, and that's when it really became to light. So when we got through in 08, 09 area, we weren't aware of it. And then we had to unfortunately sit on it because of the economic climate. And then when things started back in 15, when we went back to re-up the variances because they always sunset after 3 years, all of this came to light with Robin. So then we went ahead and started the process back with that. I think the biggest difference between the 15 attempt and this attempt is we actually engaged with the homeowners, got their buy-in, and made them a part of the buffer that they wanted to have. So, they're supposed to have a 25-foot buffer on their side. I'm not really sure it's there. I know it may be on paper, but again, it's not really planted. It's not landscaped. What we're doing is we're actually trying to enhance it to a buffer standard, probably above a buffer standard, because the plant material that we're putting in that 35 feet probably should be in about a 50-foot, 55-foot, and we're compressing it.
So here's the problem I have. Imagine for a second you're a property owner on the other side of the line, okay? And your expectation has always been, because you live in Milton, that there's going to be a 75-foot buffer or a 50-foot buffer, depending on the acreage of the assemblage, right?
Right.
So how did... Yeah, then you wake up one day and you say, no, it's not going to be 75. It's got to be 50. It's going to be 30. How do we...
Again, I think.
How do you manage their expectations?
I think it's the shape of the property is really a big issue with this, because like you said, when you get to the ins and the outs and the overlaps, that
it's a mess.
northeastern section is almost done. It's really not much left that's buildable. When you put into the setback off of the road with all the road improvements that are going on in there, this is kind of I want to say remnant piece, but it's kind of the last piece in the puzzle that has to be built. And we try to get very creative with our land plan to be able to make that by including open spaces, including a mixture of unit sizes. So we've got 35-foot wide product all the way down to 20-foot product, so that we have some flexibility to work within the conditions that were given to us. We've got 3 really nice specimen trees on the southwestern corner that we're working around versus trying to put an entrance there. So we've really tried to get as creative as we can, unfortunately, because of the challenge of the depth, because once I've put in that 75-foot buffer, 10-foot improvement setback, my front building setback goes to 40. What I'm left with is about 70 feet deep. I really can't fit much in that.
Yeah, I agree. But the other thing I'd point out is you wouldn't have a problem if instead of having 2 rows of houses deep on that little skinny piece, it was only 1 row deep. So the challenge that's created, we're creating ourselves with the design. And I'm not a developer, so I don't know. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have to have that extra row of houses in there to make the whole thing viable. There's plenty of reasons why the density has to be the density. Right. And I'm just saying these were all things we were aware of at the beginning. So it's sort of tough to say that, they're a hardship, I guess.
I feel like we've met the hardship requirement. I think staff also concurs that we've met the hardship requirement. But again, if we want to continue a discussion, I'm fine with trying to work through whatever we need to work through on that.
I have a question on that, and like Councilmember Cook earlier, I'm not so hung up as much on the materials as in I have a hard time sometimes with one size fits all, and I'm also a big proponent that I don't, as long as the intent is there and it's a quality product and looks really good and maintenance free and whatnot. I realize why we had to put the requirements in at one point, but again, don't want to tell somebody this is have the city tell them exactly this is what you got to do unless we're going to be prepared to guarantee that it's successful and that the public likes it. Right. But the heartburn I have on it is the variance for the buffer, and again, I want to. There have been instances where we have granted a variance, but, where it has actually improved the view shed from other areas and allowed less density, whereas this one's, allowing more density. But to Joe's point, Ken, I want to ask you a legal question, on the hardship, because this is a, funky shaped property, it does make it tough if you apply the 75-foot buffer all the way around. It will, impact the development greatly. And economically, I'm sure that would it may or may not be viable. But is technically, legally, is that a hardship or not? What's if our code basically deems the property not developable within reason, or is it the buffer was there and the property was purchased, so it's a self-imposed hardship?
We've had this discussion before in this chamber with respect to Milton's variance requirements. There's basically 4 criteria, and I think we've always sort of felt comfortable that 1, 3, and 4. 1 is if we grant a variance relief, it wouldn't offend the spirit and intent of the code. Obviously I think I've heard presentations, and you all are probably fairly comfortable with that as well. 3 was relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good. And I know this council well enough to know you probably wouldn't think of anything that would cause a detriment to the public good, so you're not going to go there. That the public health, safety, and welfare are secured. Again, that seems to permeate all of our discussions. So we tend to camp out on paragraph 2 is the one we tend to camp out on, and that is that there exist extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the property that the literal application of the code would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography. So, that the first section of that is clearly talking about the shape of the land. It's the physical characteristics of the land. Then there's an or, and then it says, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. So actually, paragraph 2 can actually be divided into two different elements. One of them is the unusual characteristics of the land, the size, shape, et cetera, and the other one is more of a catch-all, and that is if there are other exceptional situations that you believe justify relief. And so candidly, it sort of gives you two options on this one, Mr. Mayor. With respect to, I think what your salient question was, though, is does the land have to be unbuildable? I could suggest to you that there are opinions on both sides of that. Certainly one of the historical reasons for variances is to avoid unusually shaped pieces of property where a strict application would result in an unbuildable lot. It cannot be built on, therefore it's a de facto administrative taking, and therefore if we don't grant relief, then we need to buy it. All right, well, that's not here. But that's not the only rationale either. The other rationale is there a product that is a product that the city believes is a viable, good product that is consistent with the intent of what the city's plans are, that we need to grant relief because of the unusual shape of the property, and that if we don't grant that relief, we don't get a product that is consistent with what we otherwise want. And I think there is enough room in paragraph 2 to allow that as well. So that's my opinion.
Carol?
So let me explore that for one moment. I think the term unnecessary hardship is probably the critical piece. And I don't think that the unnecessary part is incumbent on the city. What I would wonder is, given the shape of this property and the fact that the AG1 part is would allow for building with a greater buffer, whereas the southern part does not. I think if I had seen something that showed some give and take on buffer in areas where you could have a greater buffer and maybe less density, would be something that then, because the whole property is not necessarily, does not create an unnecessary hardship. And in fact, we don't have a hardship. I mean, you might have a hardship, but we don't have the hardship. Is that fair? I mean,
Well, I don't think that from what I have seen thus far, there has been much resistance to that point. I mean, again, I don't know that I would consider it a hardship from the standpoint that this lot is unbuildable, this parcel is unbuildable, this assemblage is unbuildable. I think the reality is they want to deliver a product. I am sure that, to Councilmember Longoria's point, that there might be economic reasons why they need to design it the way they need to design it, and basically want to convince you that this is such an overall good product that you ought to see fit to grant the variance. That's at least what I'm hearing.
Okay, Rick?
Yeah, I guess when I look at the AG1 is still usable, buildable as AG1, but we're making it a part of this proposal. I'm not so hung up on the issue of the building materials. I understand the need for flexibility. I was there when we started the overlay with Fulton County. There were very specific reasons why we did that, to try to improve the area as it was being developed. But what they presented, if you're going to be using natural stone and different things, I think that could, I'm open to looking at the product variation from what we have before. I guess the concern I have more is on the buffer side, really, as far as what we're reducing. And then just a comment or a question to you, Prague. You'd mentioned something about if this was commercial. I just want to be clear, this never is in any way going to be used for commercial in our land use map today, correct?
Yes. So again,
that's not an option.
It was just So it was just an example. So again,
okay.
What I was trying to make a statement. So every variance is project specific. It's case by case basis. If after 2 years some other project comes up, we will analyze the project based on its merit, and we will make a recommendation. But you are right. So again, okay. I was not saying.
I just want to make sure, because I think we took, because that is mainly a residential corridor.
Yes, sir.
both on Morris as well as McGinnis Ferry around the corner, and then going down Bethany Bend. I just want to make sure that didn't come into when we were factoring, looking at variances and other options. We're not going to consider, at least right now, this body's not considering that as a commercial property. Okay.
Okay, Matt?
Always comes back to density. I want to talk about density really quick. So he's asking for 54 units, right? Under the current zoning, TR allows for 9 units per acre, right? In AG1, just under 4 acres, you're looking at 3 units, so a total of 43 under the current zoning, technically is what he's legally allowed to build, right?
So the TR district states that you can go up to 9 units per acre, but our zoning is conditional, just like they're asking for 6.38 or whatever it is. But TR allows you to ask for something up to 9 units, with exception to the senior housing. That's a special case with the use permit.
Okay.
But would that, excuse me, Matt, but to clarify that, would that take in, but if the buffer requirement, it could certainly be less if there's, to meet the buffer requirements as is.
Yeah.
So, under just staff's opinion, obviously 75-foot buffer, we really don't know what he would be allowed under right, according if he just started to build today under that. But, is that right?
I mean, currently today, if he wanted to build something, he would need to most likely come in for a zoning modification to the site plan, because the approved site plan that was approved in 2008 would be substantially different, and that's the only TR that he has on those 2 original parcels.
Right. So what I'm asking is obviously our comprehensive plan has a different designation for the future land use plan for that AG1 property, which is high density HDR2, right?
Right. It's 5 to 8.
Right. Exactly. So is it unreasonable for someone to ask for the number of units he has based on the future land use plan?
What he's currently requesting is consistent with what the future land use plan designates for the AG1 portion, yes.
So is it against reason as well that maybe in the future other developers or builders might see that AG1 and HDR and make a similar request based on that?
I mean, we would accept an application such as that.
Okay. So, and again, defending the comprehensive plans is important to me. I think that the question is then, so a lot of people are talking about hardship as part of the floodplain. I'm not really seeing that as such as an issue. I'm really more concerned about the AG1 and how do they get to why they even asked for the change in that zoning there. That's just something I wanted to bring up.
Okay. I just have really more of a statement. I like the project. I like the design. I've spent time driving around all the neighborhoods and whatnot. It fits the area. And again, I talked about the materials, but the issue I have is, and you said it right, Matt, it's down to density as well as Joe with, you could probably cut, a row out or whatever, and it's probably buildable. I know we don't know that. So, again, that's where I struggle with it is the density, allowing just to disregard the buffer, the 75-foot buffer, and, which would increase the density for no other benefit other than economic. That's where I'm struggling with, and that, as we move forward, again, I know it's all case by case, but that does set somewhat a precedent. So I just let you know that's where I struggle with it. But anybody else? Laura?
I have a comment. I'm especially concerned for the adjacent property owners, specifically Hidden Forest, because they're single-family homes there. And I spent some time looking at what happened back in that 2007 to 2008 time period, that the city went back and specifically looked at these parcels and put into place that buffer requirement, because I don't think they knew what was going to happen there. So I believe that was put there to protect the property owners. I also have a concern, when they went, in good faith to talk to the adjacent property owners about reducing this buffer, I don't know for sure that they were told that they were entitled to a 75-foot undisturbed buffer and that they were agreeing to something that was way less. And that concerns me. And I do, for those reasons, find that the hardship can't be proven because I do feel like much of the 75-foot buffer is necessary to provide that separation between the changes in the density, the 6.38 versus the single-family homes. It's not one home per acre, but it's not as much as 6. So those are my reasons for not being able to see my way clear of the hardship. And I also feel like the shape of the lots is, he doesn't have to buy those parcels. And the floodplain is a self-imposed, any of us that have floodplain property know that that's a high risk. So those are my comments.
Okay. Anything else? If not, if there's no more questions, I'll open up for a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to deny RZ 18-14/BC 18-09.
Second.
All right, I have a motion for denial from Councilmember Bentley with a second from Councilmember Jameson. Is there any discussion? Matt?
Yeah, I don't know if I can go with a denial on this. I'm not exactly sure that I can go with an approval either, but I think that what I like about this in particular is that there was an applicant that followed our comprehensive plan and did everything we asked through the process. And that was the point that the Planning Commission had made as well. I think the thing that would be in favor of this as well, we don't really know what they can build per se, but we do know that they have done everything that we've asked them to do. And if we, if we have that relationship with someone that works that hard to do that, especially if over the years, it would be worth considering. Just my thoughts.
Okay.
We are considering it.
Carol?
No, what?
Oh, I thought you had.
No, are we going to vote?
We're going to vote, yes, but we're just discussing it right now. Joe?
Yeah, so it's sort of strange because the two things that we denied from a recommendation point of view are the two things I was comfortable with. The one thing that we accepted, I had problems with. And I don't want to be arbitrary in terms of the density. Because in this particular case, the real issue has to do with the buffer area. And the buffer area impacts the adjacent property owners in a significant way. And so it's not just about how many parcels we can fit into this development. Because the reality is that doesn't necessarily change the buffer space itself. And so, when I looked at this, I thought, well, hold it. If we reduce the number of units that we allow, does that actually make a difference? And I kept coming back to the fact that I don't think that it does. The only thing that's going to make a difference is how we establish what the buffer needs to be. If we're willing to give up on 75 feet, because maybe that's a little bit onerous in this particular case, is 33 the right number? And I have a hard time going there, saying, yeah, 33 makes sense. But, we dial the clock forward 10 years, 15 years, there's something like this there. It's not like, this piece of property needs to be something else needs to be done with it because it's surrounded by things that are like this. So it fits in very well with what is in place today and what is nearby. And so that's just, I don't know why I'm telling you guys the difficulties I have in reconciling this, but that's where I am.
I think we all are. Laura? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Matt had his hand up. But I would recommend, because of the building materials and the architecture is beautiful, and this is what we want for Milton, that this, parcel be incorporated quickly into the Deerfield Form-Based Code to take care of that cleanup. And, I'm still going to feel the same way about the buffer.
Okay. And Matt?
And, Parag, I forgot to ask a question. So in the 2008 approval for the 98 units that was there originally, what was the buffer on that project?
It would have been 40 foot, right?
Yeah, it was 40 foot on the rear adjacent to the main part that you're looking at where the single families were, and then 25 feet on the other property lines. And that was based on what was thought of at the time. That was the old Fulton County requirements.
Okay, so so 2008, it was an average of less than 35 around the property, essentially. 40 around for one part and 25 on the sides. So again, that goes to my point, is that we have passed things before that the applicant came forth with an expectation of what we had originally had. That just was part of the relationship. That was all I was saying.
Okay.
If I can ask staff one other question. What we approved originally back in 2008 for the senior housing, was that a higher, how did they get that many units on that small of a parcel? What was approved for? Was that more of an I don't want to use the word apartment, but was it a different building structure for senior housing?
So the
for
difference,
density?
sorry, excuse me, I'm sorry. So the difference was, one, the floodplain on the southern end next to the Montessori school, as well as on the previous development, they were going to take down the specimen trees at the corner of the southeast corner. Next to the Montessori school, what's now the Montessori school. So they had two buildings kind of that were on that southern portion, and then another building that was in the area near the now roundabout. Okay, so, and they had been approved for 2 stories with a garage. I believe they had garages underneath. And then subsequently, they went to the Board of Zoning Appeals and got an approval to go up to 3 stories.
So that's how they got the more units for that area, was it part of it?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second for denial. And we've had discussion. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Nay.
Raise your. What was that?
Two against.
Two were against.
Okay. All right. So that fails 5-2 or passes 5-2. All right. Thank you. All right, City, if we can move on to unfinished business.
Next item is consideration of an ordinance to revise Division 6 cell phones and other electronic devices. Agenda item number 19075. First presentation at April 8th City Council meeting is Stacey Ellis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm requesting that we revise our ordinance surrounding cell phone policy. The cell phone policy was put in place back in 2006, and technology has changed quite a bit since then. So since this policy is pertaining only to employees or internally outside of the citizens, we're requesting to remove the policy altogether from our ordinances and state that that we will have a policy that lives in administratively that is managed by the city manager. So I'm just requesting that we approve removal of the policy from our ordinances.
Okay, any questions on that? Stacy? Ken, you're good with that?
I am.
Okay, I'll open up for motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve agenda item number 19-075.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Longoria, second from Councilmember Moore. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And I need to clarify, do we have any public comment on that?
We do not, sir.
Okay, so I'll close that here, and then I think technically we're fine, right, Ken, since we didn't have any public?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, City, if you'll please sound the next item.
Next item is consideration of an ordinance to revise Chapter 46, Article 3, Division 4, Section 46-123, acceptance by a company to make minor administrative changes, including updating the address of City Hall. Agenda item number 19076. First presentation at April 8th. Mr. Parag Agrawal.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. So the thing which you have in front of you is basically recommending some minor administrative changes to the solid waste management ordinance. I also have with me our conservation project manager, Teresa Stickles. So some of the changes which we are proposing is that we have the new address of the City Hall. We moved here around 2 years back. The ordinance still says the Deerfield location, so we just want to clean this to this current location. Right now, for the contract for waste haulers, the city now requires them to fill out an affidavit, but the city ordinance basically talks about they can put it on their company's letterhead. So again, we just want to make those administrative changes.
Okay.
Which those changes are also on the second page, which you have in front of you.
Okay. Question, Rick?
Yeah, just a question. So we're making changes to the address. I know when we came up with the address, we tried to make it so it incorporated 2006 when we were incorporated in Heritage Walk. What would we actually, I guess, explain to me? What are the changes that we're making?
So, Teresa, help me out. So basically, there are two changes. One is the address change. The address is right now the address is of the original City Hall address, the Deerfield location. Now it's basically 2006 Heritage Walk. One change. The second change is basically when we basically signed the contract with our waste haulers. Right now, the city ordinance says that they can submit it on their company's letterhead. But now the city requires them to make submission on they have to submit an affidavit. So that's a change.
Thanks. Okay. Any other questions on that? Do you have any public comment on that, Sudi?
We do not, sir.
I'll close that hearing. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 19-076.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilmember Bentley with a second from Councilmember Longoria for approval. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Excuse me. All right, we'll move on to new business. Sudi, if you could please call the first item.
This item is agreement for sale of realty between the City of Milton and Cogburn Road Investments, LP, a Georgia limited partnership, for 4.82 acres, more or less, located in land lots 1041 and 1048, 2nd District, 2nd Section, in the City of Milton, Fulton County, Georgia, on Webb Road, and being a portion of Fulton Tax Parcel Number 527-010-470-116 for a purchase price of $1,600,000. Agenda item number 19093. Mr. Kendra.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much. In your agenda folder this evening, you will see the first of two acquisition contracts that are somewhat related. These are between the City of Milton and an entity called the Cogburn Road Investments, LP. This particular acquisition contract is for a 4.82 acre parcel of property located on Webb Road in the City of Milton, and otherwise just described within the context of the contract. And I believe you will see there is an Exhibit A that is memorialized and identified in the contract that links back to a site plan as well as a legal description. The acquisition price is $1.6 million. If this acquisition contract is to be approved by both parties, there would be a $10,000 earnest money payment. That $10,000 earnest money would be used and applied against the acquisition price if in fact the parcel closes, or it would be refunded if we get out of the contract during the 45-day due diligence, which leads me to the due diligence period. It is a little bit abbreviated. It's 45 days, so we're going to have to make sure that we get all of the due diligence done promptly on that. But otherwise, this acquisition contract is very similar to all of the other ones that we have put together before, other than perhaps the 45-day. There is a contingency in the contract with respect to the next property we're going to talk about, and that is we don't have to close on this one unless we close on the next parcel that I've talked to you about. Mr. Mayor, otherwise, I think everything else is in order.
And just to clarify, the 45-day due diligence, if we can't get that done in 45 days, we have the ability to
We have two options. Number
Walk
one, if
away
we don't have
or
it done
extend
in
it.
45 days, we can ask the seller for an amendment and bring that back to you to elongate the due diligence. Or if push comes to shove and we're just really can't get it done or have concerns, during the 45-day, we can get out of the contract.
Okay, just want to clarify that. Okay, any questions for Ken on this? Teresa, do you have? No.
I have a brief presentation.
Okay.
So, yeah, for lack of a better name, we're simply calling this the Webb Road property. It is in the southeastern part of the city, as you can see from this green star right here. That star greatly covers the property, but it just gives you an idea of where it is in regard to the city as a whole. So these are the other acquisitions. I'll go through these quickly because you know them, but the first acquisition was the Milton Country Club right here in the center. The second was Lackey Road in the southwest portion of the city. The third acquisition, which we closed on last Wednesday, was the Belmont Farms at the corner of Birmingham Road and Freemanville. And then at the April 8th council meeting, you entered into a contract for this Fields Crossroads property, this 88 acres here. So the first three have closed. This one is in due diligence now, and this is the location of the one that's being considered tonight. So we're going to zoom into that location. This is kind of a unique situation because it's a carve out of a larger property. The larger property is this piece here that's sort of shaped like Louisiana. This property, the rest of the property is owned by the Windward Village Owners Association, and it is designated as civic space. What we're talking about is a piece of property, a carve out, right here and right here on either side of this waterway, and we're going to go to it here so you can see. This is the two tracks that we're talking about. The total is 4.82. And as you can see there, the smaller of the two parcels is 1.64 acres and the larger is 3.18. It borders a larger parcel of conservation land, the property that is behind it. And, so as I say, this is kind of a unique situation. It's different from the other acquisitions we looked at. I think the thinking of the committee was that even though you have that conservation land sitting behind, if this property along the road frontage was developed, then you drive by and never know that there's conservation land, 11 acres sitting back there. So this purchase preserves the depth of that property. So it preserves a natural area, wildlife habitat, and then the view shed and this is really important in what is otherwise a very heavily developed part of the city. So there are natural areas, as you can see here from the aerial. It's heavily wooded. And again, if you can just envision if this part up here were all developed, and we do have a development plan submitted for it with 24 units to be built here up at the front, you can see how you would lose all of the sense of what was actually here. And as you can see, it's highly developed all around, so it really is quite important to have an island or an oasis of green space in this part of the city. I went through the same process we've done before, the IPAC tool to look at any threatened or endangered species that might be found in this area, not that have been. And as our other properties, this is a location where you could perhaps find Cherokee darter or Michaux sumac. The interesting thing, at least to me, because I'm a birder, is in all the other acquisitions, when you use this tool, it shows that this property could be home to 5 migratory species. Well, apparently, because this property is further east of our other acquisitions, it is actually home to 8 migratory species. So that was, as I say, exciting to me and perhaps no one else. So in summary, it's 4.82 acres. The purchase price is $1.6 million. An important thing to understand about that price, because it does seem, perhaps to people who aren't familiar with the value of property in that area, it may seem a little high, but it is zone T4 open. It is tremendously valuable land. We had an appraisal done to understand what it was worth, and this $1.6 million is actually under the appraisal that was done. So we did feel like this was a very reasonable acquisition price. So does anyone have any questions?
Anybody have any questions on this? No, I'm not familiar with it. So just no, I'm excited about this opportunity because it does give us some natural space over on Highway 9, and add that to the other property, get a lot of bang for the buck, hopefully. Okay. Do we have any public comment on this, Sue?
We do not, sir.
Okay. I'll close the hearing and open up for a motion on this.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose that we approve the Webboro purchase agenda item number 19-093.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for approval from Councilmember Morgan with a second from Councilmember Jameson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. All right, Sudi, if you'd please call the next item.
Next item is agreement for sale of realty between the City of Milton and Red Bull Holdings, LLC, a Georgia limited liability company, for 28.20 acres, more or less, located in land lots 399, 465, and 466, 2nd District, 2nd Section, in the City of Milton, Fulton County, Georgia, on Hamby Road, Fulton Tax Parcel number 22518-003-990-285 and 22519-004-660-398 for a purchase price of $1,050,000. Agenda item number 19094, Mr. Ken Gerard.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much. This is the second acquisition contract. The parties are the City of Milton. The seller is Red Bull Holdings, LLC. The acreage amount is 28.2 acres. The tax parcel identification numbers are as presented and as the clerk just read off. The acquisition price is $1,050,000. There is no contingency on this one as there was on the prior acquisition contract that we just approved, but this one has the same 45-day due diligence, the same $10,000 in earnest money, and the same availability of options should we need to get out of it during the due diligence period or otherwise seek an extension. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any questions on this? Any public comment, Sudi?
No, sir.
Okay. I'll open up for a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve agenda item number 19-094.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion for approval of Councilmember Jameson with a second from Councilmember Bentley.
That was Ken's.
It was Ken's.
It was me.
Ken's made the motion.
Did you change your voice?
I'm sorry.
It was all me.
Okay, Councilmember Kuntz, the motion for approval with the second from Councilmember Bentley. You guys are starting to sound just alike.
I guess.
And I do want to just make a statement too, and I know some of our members and Colts out here on our committee, and Teresa, just thank you for all your hard work on these parcels and whatnot. So great benefit for the city. So
Can I say one thing?
No.
I meant to say at the
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I meant to say at the beginning was that today is Earth Day, so I thought it was really appropriate that
We bought some earth.
we came forward. We bought some earth, yeah. And if all of these acquisitions go forward, the ones that are pending, y'all will have conserved 380 acres so far, and there's still money left to spend. So I think that's an amazing accomplishment on Earth Day.
Thank you for
Yeah.
noting that for us. That's great. Thank you.
So, great team effort. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous, City. I think I asked, there's no public comment on that, correct?
No, sir,
All
there
right,
is not.
close that hearing. All right, let's see. We've got one more new business item. Sudi, if you'll please send that item.
This item is consideration of a resolution of the City of Milton authorizing the submission of application to Georgia Institute of Technology for the 2019 Georgia Smart Communities Challenge program for funding in the amount of $100,000. Agenda item number 19095. Mr. Parag Agrawal.
Hi, Parag Agrawal, City's Community Development Director. Today I'm here to present you the resolution that will allow the city to participate in the Smart Communities Challenge Grant Program. It is a program that's sponsored by Georgia Tech in partnership with the state of Georgia and the ARC, that's Atlanta Regional Commission. The city is applying for this grant application to do research on ways to implement smart technology in downtown Milton, Deerfield Corridor, and along our trail network. As the City Council members heard last week in your work session, a number of public and private projects are planned in our Crabapple area. We are also trying to revitalize our Deerfield Corridor, and very soon the city will also be updating our trail master plan and will be constructing trails as per the recommendations of the trail master plan. So the goal is, since we are having all these public and private projects going on, how we can incorporate smart technology in our public and private projects. So with this goal in mind, the city's focus of this grant application is to create a more pedestrian-friendly experience. This is the stated goal in our comprehensive plan, that our downtown Milton and the Deerfield corridor should be much more pedestrian-oriented. So our focus is trying to increase the pedestrian experience and pedestrian safety. So we are trying to come up with this app that can be downloaded on our cell phones. So if a pedestrian is approaching a traffic signal, the traffic signal can basically hear that this pedestrian is approaching, and the traffic lights can change to a walkable sign. We are also looking at creating a valet hub. So again, instead of providing all these projects with their own parking spaces, we are trying to come up with this valet app in which there will be a valet station in downtown. And if you are visiting some restaurant or something, there will be an app on your cell phone which you can download. And you can basically call that valet once you're done with your dinner. So the total project cost is $100,000, out of which the city is required to have a match of $50,000. It could be $40,000 can be in kind, and $10,000 will be a cash value. So you have to work with a professor of Georgia Tech. So we have identified a professor of Georgia Tech. There will be two components. One component will be implementation. So it's a 1-year project. So 1 year will be the implementation. And since the professor of Georgia Tech will be involved, there's a research component also. So he will be researching here, and we can also have some implementation on the smart technology. Georgia Tech selected 4 communities in 2018. So this program was started in by Georgia Tech in 2018. They selected 4 communities. They were City of Chamblee, Chatham County, City of Albany, and Gwinnett County in 2018. They received 25 applications, and they selected 4 communities. This year also, Georgia Tech plans to select 4 or 5 communities, and we want that City of Milton should be one of them.
Okay. Any questions on that? Ken, I'm going to ask you, I don't think it's an issue, but as Parag was presented, I have a child that attends Georgia Tech, but I assume there's no connection with.
I think, Mr. Mayor, you're perfectly fine.
Okay.
But we're all shocked.
So, okay. All right. Is there any public comment?
No, sir, there's not.
Okay. I'll close that. Do I have a motion on this?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 19-095.
Second. I have a motion from Councilmember Cookerly and that's not there. I have a motion from Councilmember Bentley with a second from Councilmember Longoria. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. One thing, Saturday, Rock for Rescues. So just, I don't know, Shannon, if you want to clarify, it starts at 1 o'clock?
It does.
And,
It does. It starts at 1 o'clock and will go to until 10 p.m. And we have shuttles running from Milton High School. You can park at Northwestern, Milton High School, Crabapple Crossing Elementary, as well as First Baptist Church. But the shuttle will pick up at Milton High School as well as Crabapple First Baptist and then drop off at the Shell. So, but 1 to 10, full lineup of bands, and we'll have the nonprofits there with us. Many have adopted animals as well as sort of experience with wildlife with Aware, so it should be a great day. Lots of food trucks and vendors.
okay, sounds good. Anything, Matt?
Yeah, it was great hearing the tornado sirens go off for the first time in a long time, and that was something we started back, 2012. I think we really wanted to push that, so really appreciated hearing that, and just thanks for staff and everybody for keeping on that.
No worries. There was actually circulation. Yeah. It just never made it down.
Awesome.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We'll move on to staff reports. Prague, do you have something?
So this is my last item for tonight. So I should stop saying my name now. Just want to give you some project updates from the department. Since today is the Earth Day, Teresa asked me to start with my green space bond purchase update and the tree canopy update. Updates on the green space bond purchase. So last week on April 18th, 2019, the city finalized the purchase of 6 parcels located at the corner of Freemanville Road and Birmingham Road. So again, right, till now we have 3 properties which are closed. One is the Milton Park, the former Milton Country Club property. Second is the Wolf property. And third is this Belmont Farms. Tree preservation ordinance. We are making significant headways on revising our tree preservation ordinance. As we know, this project is going on since last 2 years, and we are very close to finalizing it. We are meeting with our stakeholders every other week. The next meeting is on April 25th, and we plan to bring this in front of you in May so that it can be revised, adopted if the City Council chooses to adopt this in the month of June. So you basically gave us the time of July 22nd to basically to revise our tree preservation ordinance. So most likely we'll be meeting that deadline. Third is this rezoning and the use permit applications. So in my last update, I mentioned that the staff has received a use permit application for a private school on a Red Road property. This use permit went in front of the DRB. We also had a CZIM meeting, and based on the recommendations of the DRB, we have received a letter from the applicant that they would like to withdraw this proposal, this project. But since this project was advertised, it will go through the Planning Commission and the City Council approval process. But we will be placing some statement on the agenda so that the community does know that this project has been withdrawn. Unified Development Code. Again, this project has been going on since the last couple of years. The city is trying to streamline the development review process by combining many of the zoning and the development review regulations. We are planning to get a draft from the consultants in last week of April. So once we receive a draft and the city staff reviews it, we plan to bring the Unified Development Code in front of the City Council in the month of May or June. Just to giving, last time it came in front of you was in August of 2017. So it has been almost 2 years now, 18 months-ish. So we want to bring this in front of the city council so that you know what's going on. And then we will be planning a number of community meetings so that the community knows what will be, what's the draft, and we can get the feedback from them. I have already mentioned the Smart Communities Challenge program. We did submit the LCI application. In last month, the City Council did approve the resolution for submitting a LCI application for the Deerfield Corridor. That went in. The result will be in June. So we are basically waiting from ARC to hear whether we got accepted or not. So these are my updates. Happy to answer any questions.
I just want to make a statement too, and this goes back to this last zoning case we heard, and, I think everybody expressed their concerns or whatnot. Again, I think, from my opinion, maybe the issue there, because all the other properties had less of a buffer, and it could have been a good project. Maybe that's something that may be interested in looking at changing our code on that, where the 75-foot buffer in that overlay, or the overlay may be a little strong for all the areas. We may want to look at that, because overall, it could have been a decent project but again, I think there was hesitancy to relax the buffer standard on there just to allow more density, but, it may be something we want to look at overall. I don't know. So.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, finance. Bernadette.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you may have heard, the GFOA awarded the city with the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. That means 3 people other than Shannon and Mr. Gilbert read it cover to cover. And that we've met 14 of the mandatory criteria out of the 27 total. And as a staff, we're going to work on 2020's budget to enhance and improve that even further. I just want to give a big thank you to all of the team. The entire staff really put in a lot of effort and work on ensuring that we met those requirements. So a really big thank you to everybody. It's our hope that this enhanced document conveys the city's budget process and the decision-making process in a clear and concise manner to all of the stakeholders. With that same theme in mind, Finance, along with Communications and our graphic designer, produced the city's first popular annual finance report. That is kind of the condensed, non-technical version of what the auditors presented this evening, and it is my hope that then people can look at that and truly understand the plan and the results of the actual, what has happened throughout the year. Also, we will have the budget mid-year amendments coming forth in a public hearing on May 6th. You saw that in first presentation this evening. And then in June, the FY20 budget process will kick off. We'll have all of the information out to staff, and they'll be working on their related requests for continuing operations as well as new initiatives. So that will be before you later in the year, or later in the summer in August. As far as property tax collections, 30-day letters, which are also known as intent of FIFA, will be going out this week. If a tax sale is required, that will be held later this year in September. And then occupational tax renewals were due on March 31st, and Finance is working alongside code enforcement to send proper notifications to all the businesses to get them in renewal status. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Appreciate it.
Good work. Okay. If I can have a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss land acquisition.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.